It's time for Waking Up with Wesley. Today's forecast and weather-wide discussion with WLOX First Alert Weather's senior meteorologist, Wesley Williams.
Waking Up with Wesley is sponsored by Exclusive Auto Brokers. For the best deals on wheels, visit Exclusive Auto Brokers on Beatline Road in Long Beach.
All right, good morning and thank you for waking up with Wesley. I'm senior meteorologist Wesley Williams. So this is another day that we approach the peak of hurricane season, and we're going to take a look at what the latest is on the tropics. And then after that, we're going to take a look at our local weather, which is feeling pretty nice this morning if you've been out and about. We'll talk about how long that nice feel will last as we take a peek at the weekend forecast. So without further ado, let's take you to the maps. Here's what I'm watching on your Wednesday morning. There's a storm that I haven't talked about much on TV because it really doesn't have anything to really do with our weather. It's Lorena, or you could call it also Pacific Hurricane Lorena. It is located very close to Baja California this morning, and it is continuing to move off toward the north and west at about 15 miles per hour. So as you can see, Hurricane Lorena, the Pacific Hurricane Lorena's track is going to take it into Baja California and then inland over western Mexico, at which point it will fall apart over land. So not really going to be much of a direct impact to us here on the Mississippi coast. Now, maybe at some point this weekend or next week, some of the leftover energy, some of the leftover moisture with that might roll eastward and might help us to see some higher rain chances along with a few other weather features early next week. But in the short term, not really looking at much of an impact from that. You know, what's interesting about Lorena is that our folks from Keesler Air Force Base, they actually just took off and are heading on a reconnaissance flight into that Pacific hurricane. Yeah, they don't just fly storms in the Atlantic, but they also fly storms in the Pacific. And I think we do have the very first tracking information on that reconnaissance flight. It's right here, so they just took off like an hour ago, so they're still located very close to the Gulf Coast. Looks like the tracking on that plane, yeah, it's looking like it's close to Jackson County or Harrison County at this moment in time. But eventually they're going to hang out toward the west, and they're going to head out to Lorena, Pacific Hurricane Lorena. And yeah, they do reconnaissance flights. I just saw them post about that on Facebook this morning. And it was a really interesting post that had a cool picture of their aircraft that they used to fly into the storm. So if you have Facebook, check out the Hurricane Hunters page. I'm actually going to share that. I'll say Hurricane Hunters flying Pacific Hurricane Lorena. And flying from Biloxi into Pacific Hurricane Lorena. So there, I've shared it on my meteorologist Wesley Williams Facebook page. So if you know that page, you can just find it there. But anyway, enough about that Pacific storm. We zoom out and move back over because this is the part of the water that we watch all the time for weather that could impact the East Coast, the Gulf Coast. It's the tropics in the Atlantic Basin. And there still is that one area to watch near the Cape Verde Islands. As of Wednesday morning, we're taking a look at the satellite, and this satellite has been trying to load. As it does, we'll see what we can find. So we're going to be looking in this general area here. Do we see anything that's looking particularly well defined? Any type of circulation? And it's really hard to tell. There's just kind of a broad, loose circulation. We can see some of these clouds coming down like this, some of these clouds coming up like that. So other than that very broad, undefined circulation, and there's some dry places, like there's only, if we want to see where the thunderstorms are located, they're on the northwestern side of the broad circulation, and maybe on the southeastern side of the broad circulation. So there's kind of a gap in the activity. There's no beef right here. There's no beef right here. So the circulation not really complete. The thunderstorms not really complete, but give it some time. And the computer models are indicating maybe we can get some better organized system out of this. So you look at the futurecast for Wednesday, and We'll go into later today, and this does start to get a little bit better organized. You can see that circulation trying to tighten up there as we get deeper into tomorrow. And perhaps we might be watching a tropical depression or tropical storm tomorrow, according to this particular computer model. You take a look at Friday, it looks even better organized. I mean, it's got a lot of good circulation going on there. And so at that point in time, you might be looking at a tropical storm by Friday, according to this computer model, and maybe later Friday night, it might make a run at hurricane strength, according to this particular computer model. As you can see it right there, very well defined circulation. We have the wind speeds with the same computer model. Right there, you're just looking at clouds and rain, but we can also take a look at the wind speed. So today, again, not really finding much well organized. It will be this general area. We are seeing some winds coming down like that. We are seeing some winds coming up like that, like I showed you just now on the satellite from just looking at the cloud motion. But the model winds, they don't really show a completely closed off circulation, still kind of an open circulation for today. But it's sitting over some warm water in the Atlantic, and there's not a ton of wind shear above it, and it's got a decent amount of moisture to work with, so it's got some things working in its favor. And over time, as we go from today to tomorrow, you definitely see the circulation getting a bit better organized and some of the wind speeds starting to increase as that circulation tightens up. So you can see it really is beginning to get better organized tomorrow, making a run at maybe a depression. And then we take a look at Friday, and the colors we're seeing on here are orange, which if you look at the scale, indicates wind speeds of greater than 40 miles an hour. So that's wind speeds of tropical storm force showing up in one part of that system. Those winds don't go around the entire circulation, but they are in one area, the northeastern quadrant, if you will, of if there were circulation, that's where those winds would be, those tropical storm force winds would be located. And then we go a little bit more in the future toward Friday night, and we find that northeastern quadrant of the possible storm getting even stronger. We're seeing red colors. If you zoom in, you might even find some purple colors in there. Let's get in a little bit closer zoom. And yeah, you see those purple colors showing up on the kind of northern half of the apparent circulation there. So you can clearly see the circulation completely closed off. And then on this northern half, that's where we're finding some of the strongest winds. And some of those wind speeds, when you see that red color, see the purple color, that indicates possible hurricane strength. So yeah, our computer model is indicating the potential for a hurricane in the Atlantic 2 days from today, if this goes exactly how the model shows. Now, that's Thursday night, or Friday night. We can let our larger scale computer models pick this up from Friday. So we'll start the clock at Friday. We're looking in this general area to see if we find any yellow or green areas, which would indicate tropical development from one of those models. The yellow is the GFS model, green is the European model. And we're watching Friday, we're watching Saturday. We do find the GFS model showing some development in that area. European model not showing anything. We take a look at Sunday, and now both models are showing it. Look at that, green on the Euro, yellow on the GFS. So you do have multiple models indicating by the time we get to Sunday, there's going to be some kind of tropical system located in the Atlantic. So, you know, all the models, give them time, they are coming to agreement. Our in-house model forms a storm by Friday, and the other two computer models form a storm by this weekend. So sometime by Friday into the weekend, we're probably going to be talking about a new storm in the Atlantic. And we're going to watch the progress of this. Notice that it continues to move toward the west heading into next week. It does look like we see by the time we get to next Wednesday, maybe next Thursday, we've got the GFS showing some kind of system there, the European showing some kind of system there. And again, like I mentioned yesterday, this is about 500 to 700 miles to the east or northeast of Puerto Rico. by the second half of next week, Thursday, September 11th. Now you take a look at Friday, September 12th, and that's as far out as we can push the model. I would ignore whatever this is over here on the other side of Bermuda. That has nothing to do with the disturbance we are tracking. That might just be a separate system trying to form offshore of the East Coast that one model is showing. But anyway, we lose the European reflection of that disturbance here. Maybe it runs into land and maybe falls apart or runs into some unfavorable conditions. However, the GFS is showing that it could turn up. And this is what the GFS showed yesterday too. It shows a general track of a turn. That's what if we use, let's see if I have a yellow arrow anywhere. I don't think I do. I got a red arrow. We'll use that. So yeah, the GFS shows that kind of a track. If we rewind, you'll see it's actually close to that. Whereas the European model is a little bit more to the south of that, kind of in this neck of the woods. And if we rewind in general, you know, I've kind of very broadly drawn that. But that's kind of your two model scenarios as we go deep into next week. This is, you know, we are 7+ days, maybe around 9 or 10 days into the future here. And we're still talking about a system that is barely to the west of Puerto Rico. So we clearly have a long time to watch the developments on this. Right now, there's no activity in the Gulf, no activity in the Caribbean, and that Cape Verde wave is likely going to develop either later this week or this weekend. In our local area, we don't have any tropical concerns for the next 5 to 7 days, even though the peak of hurricane season is approaching. As we are in the first part of September, we tend to see activity peaking in the tropics in the first half of the month. So don't be surprised if we are tracking more and more activity in the next 2 weeks or so, as that would be that usual annual peak of activity. So good news in the tropics. We don't track anything threatening us in our local area. We're going to switch gears and talk about our local forecast. Has been a beautiful morning. We had that lovely sunrise over Biloxi earlier this morning, and we've seen some pretty nice temperatures. I do want to talk about the low temperatures that we saw earlier this morning. Let's see if we can take a look at those. So how low has the temperature gone so far today? This is what the official information shows from the National Weather Service. They say it dropped down to 63 near the Trent Lott Airport, near Moss Point, Pascagoula. Dropped down to the upper 60s at Keesler and Biloxi. Dropped down to 67 at the Gulfport Airport. And you can just see the rest of those temperatures. The majority of our region saw morning temperatures into the 60s across South Mississippi and near South Mississippi. You had many temperatures in the 60s, which, by the way, in early September is technically below normal. Normally in early September, we have lower 70s. So to go to 67, 63, that's below normal. And by the way, I actually checked the records. So look at this, the Gulfport Airport, that's where we keep the daily climate record. You know, 100 years from now, when we're looking back to see, oh, how cool was it on September 3rd, 2025? Well, that record is kept, at least for now, at the Gulfport Airport. So that's why you hear me talk about that a lot, because it's what will become our historical record from the history of our lives, when we are history, I guess you could say. So we take a look at that 67, that's using some rounding, but if you look at the specific information, we're actually seeing a 66.9 degree reading, and I think I saw some other information that had 5-minute observations that showed a 66.2 degree observation. So either way, we'll see what happens. The information that we have right now is preliminary. Whether it's rounded to 66, whether it's rounded to 67, we will know the answer to that later today when the National Weather Service officializes their daily almanac report. But for now, the preliminary data we have, around 66, 67 was this morning's low, and believe it or not, that might tie the record of 66 set back on those 3 years. So September 3rd, 1967, September 3rd, 1952, September 3rd, 1903. Those are the coldest or coolest September 3rds on record in which we had a temperature of 66, and maybe September 3rd of 2025 will join their ranks depending on how that information is officialized later today. So pretty remarkable. I didn't have that on my bingo card when I woke up this morning, possibly tying a record low temperature, but that's how nice it has been this morning. Before we do the forecast, we'll do a quick check on the current conditions. You know, this becomes dated once the video is watched on replay, but if you're watching live, those are the numbers that we have to work with this morning as of 8:49 a.m. Numbers in the 70s for most spots, even though it was in the 60s earlier this morning, but now that rising sun is playing a role in increasing the temperature, and it's going to keep doing that as we go to the rest of the day. The temperatures will keep rising until we hit the upper 80s and lower 90s this afternoon. On the coast, a place like Ocean Springs or Long Beach, you'll have a temperature of 76 this morning, going to a temperature of 88 by 2 p.m. And then a place to the north of I-10, a place away from the water. Maybe that's Van Cleve, maybe it's Saussure, Picayune, anywhere generally north of I-10. You'll be in the mid-70s this morning, but eventually you'll get to about 90 by this afternoon. So depending on where you are, you'll see temperatures this afternoon either in the upper 80s or lower 90s. And we got plenty of sunshine today, a nice looking day for most areas, but maybe there might be a stray rain shower. We were talking about the rain chances today and taking a look at a stray rain shower that might hit parts of Pearl River County, might hit parts of Stone County based on the latest information. You know, you see a lot of the rain today. It's happening mostly to the north of Interstate 10. So that's why we kind of went with a 20% for the inland rain chance today, only a 10% for the coastal rain chance today. And breaking down that timing, hardly any rain expected this morning. And then for most of the day, if we see any rain at all, it'll just be a stray shower. Looks like most of the rain, according to the models, might not take place until later this afternoon, later this evening, mainly closer to Pearl River and Stone counties. That's where you want to watch out for that rain potential. So we talked about the temperatures. Guess what? They're going to get hotter. So today, like I said, 88 on the coast, 92 inland. But by Friday, we're looking at 91 on the coast, 94 inland. So the setup in place for Friday is going to be a hot pattern for the deep south. But there is a cool front to the north with a cold snap behind it. This is early September. You can't always get these fronts to come down to the coast, and I suspect this one is going to stall before it reaches the coast. That means the cold snap is not going to reach us on the coast, but is instead going to hit areas maybe closer to North Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, New York State, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and anywhere in blue. That's where you're going to see kind of the cool snap. But that's not where we are, so we're not going to see that. What actually winds up happening with these fronts is they get stalled along the coast, and you actually can get some rain showers that try to form along that frontal boundary. So that's one thing we'll keep an eye on as we go into the Sunday, Monday, Tuesday time frame. Maybe we'll see some rain showers popping up along that stalled front nearby. And our models are showing that. They show that agreement as we get closer to the weekend. You don't really have much potential for rain Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But then at some point around Sunday, next Monday, next Tuesday, that will be that time frame that we begin to see maybe a little bit better rain potential. It's not a washout, you know, still less than an inch of rain, but it is something to watch for as we get closer to early next week. Some showers, better chances with that front end. And by the way, some of the moisture, if I rewind to this, remember we talked at the top of this video about Pacific Hurricane Lorena? If we zoom out, you can see that storm, which is located, let me show you where it's located, right there. So that's a Category 1 hurricane there. And remember the track that we showed you with that storm is going to, if I show the track, the cone, looks like that. So by Sunday, Lorena will be located over western Mexico, and notice that it is on a path up toward the north and then the northeast. Well, some of the leftover moisture, some of the leftover energy from Lorena might actually wind up continuing to move toward the north and the east. And maybe if that's around the same time, you know, sometime after Sunday toward early next week. Remember what we just showed you the map looks like around that time. Let me refresh your memory. Sunday, we're going to see a front here. Some of that moisture that will be from Lorena around here might wind up getting caught up into the tail end of this front, and so that might actually help to see a little bit better rain chance along that front as some of the remnants of Pacific Hurricane Lorena's moisture might get drawn up into the frontal boundary, helping those rain chances to increase across parts of our region early next week. So it's all connected, right? Even though we're not going to see any direct impacts from a Pacific hurricane, it might help parts of our region to see a boost in rain chance around early next week. Look, by the way, the temperatures, yeah, I mentioned they're going to heat up this weekend, seeing more of those 90s as we go into parts of the weekend. But look, after the September 7th time frame, we're not really finding any more 90s. Are they gone? Are we done with 90 degrees after September 7th? Well, check the last few years and see, when do we usually see our final 90-degree day of the year? And like clockwork, it is usually around October for the last few years in a row. Last 3 years in a row, our final 90-degree day of the year has been in early October. So maybe that's what might happen this year too. You will notice back in 2021, we had our final 90-degree day of the year a whole month earlier, in early September. And that's where we are right now, early September. But there's a reason for that. What was happening around August and September of 2021? Remember? A storm by the name of Ida. Does that ring a bell? Yeah, we were seeing a lot of rain, a lot of clouds. We had a prolonged rainy pattern around the August of 2021 into September of 2021. And so that type of rainy, cloudy pattern that eventually wound up leading into some cool fronts, that's why we lost our 90 degrees early that year. But we don't have any hurricanes this year, right now. So maybe the 90s will come back. Even though they go away around Sunday, maybe they'll come back and it'll be something like the last few years when they don't go away until early October. But all in all, that's pretty much the entirety of today's update with Waking Up with Wesley. So hopefully you know much more about the forecast and you'll head out and enjoy the nice weather we have now before things heat up heading into the weekend. I've been Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams. We'll catch you on the next video. Till then, take care.
Waking Up with Wesley has been sponsored by Exclusive Auto Brokers. For the best deals on wheels, visit Exclusive Auto Brokers on Beatline Road in Long Beach.